Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia. Welcome to another early game guidebook video as we're covering Liu Zhang, the proponent of peace in the 200 start. Now previously we have moved through all the chapter packs and covered all the unique newly added factions within each DLC. We did Sun Ce and Lu Bu for the 194, A World Betrayed, and now we have moved on to the 200, A Fates Divided. And in the 200 start, the only new faction that was added is Liu Zhang's faction. He is a combo deal with his father, who's already passed in the 200 start, but if you play an earlier start, you can play as his father Liu Yan, and we'll cover him after this guide in the future. For the 200 start, when you play as Liu Zhang, you're missing out on half of the mechanic. It's inheritance and aspiration. And since your father is already dead, the inheritance part is done. All you have to do is the aspiration part. The starting situation is relatively easy because you do start out with a big landmass on the western side, surrounded by Nanman factions and the western factions. Your early game enemy is Zhanglu, which is a rather minor faction in the game, and the battles are not going to be super difficult. The hardest part about his campaign is really just the initial setup. So most of this guide will focus on his first turn setup with his officers and how to set up the land so that you can have an easier time going forward. And we'll do one battle to showcase his special units of the Dongzhuobing Defenders and Dongzhuobing Marksmen. They're both relatively good units. There is a recruitment cap on both units that you can actually get around using the cooldown method. We'll talk about it in game. And there is obviously the inheritance faction mechanic that we'll also talk about briefly with just the aspiration portion. There is other ways to generate aspiration, which is our unique resource aside from taking the inheritance from your forefather. And this has to do with conquering new land and building tall. Once your settlements reach large city, you will generate passive aspiration for you to spend, and those can be quite useful as many of the unlocks from inheritance are provided to you. I think you're only missing 3 of the 8, so there's still quite a bit you can do with your aspiration. And we obviously start out with one of the newer unique strategists in the game in Fa Zheng, who has a very cool ability called Mock that you start with from turn 1, which is very cool. It's a damage ability where he basically curses out the enemy general and they lose health. And there is unlimited use on that, so technically you could kill people or kill every single generals on the other side just by yelling at them with Fa Zheng. In terms of our leader, Liu Zhang, he has some interesting traits. The delayed inheritance is set by default. Usually this one will be a variable one when you play as Liu Yan, depending on when you actually pass on the faction. And in this case, we have plus 5% melee evasion, plus 10% campaign movement range. And what it doesn't say here is it also has the plus 10% cost to character salary. That is not nice. That's a debuff. Our traits are terrible. We're incompetent. We're careless, clever. Kind of counteract the minus 20%. You know, we net out a 5%. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, but we'll take it. This background, ignore it. This, unfortunately, is a patch update that never came through. Usually when they update a new DLC with characters that formerly had a background, they provide them with new background. It's written in the menus here, but it's not applied in-game. So this was originally the intended change for Proponent of Peace, which provides 50% food production faction-wide. It was supposed to change into minus 20% character salary, minus 25% redeployment costs, and plus 10 faction support. This never happened, and since the game is not supported anymore, this never will happen. If you happen to be a modder and you want to fix this, this is the guideline of what Proponent of Peace should be. Now it's the same as before, plus 50% food. It's not terrible, but it's not good. This would be a lot better, especially since we are set with delayed inheritance with the plus 10% character salary. The minus 20 would have offset that, and that would have been great. That's pretty much all we need to cover here on the menu, we'll jump into game and get things set up. We'll be doing this on Legendary with 40-minute battle timers. So let's hop in here. China must be united.
主公自令尊过世后，承袭其领地，一直励精图治，尽展其能。然眼下又有一危局临门。张鲁自北方率众起兵，其麾下军队已然开拔，须与其迎头痛击以破之。待到吞并张鲁之地，便可继续北进。此刻，曹操与袁绍相持不下，皆欲置对方于死地，正是我军出手的大好时机。然兴兵拓土之时，您亦须兼顾后方。现如今蜀地之内有豪族煽动百姓，乱象日趋显著，需严加防范。南蛮诸部统一之时亦将到来，无论何人为其共主，为求扩张，都必将进犯主公治下，请务必部下哨岗，监视其动向。腹背基业如重担在肩，唯求保其周全。如此，方显主公不负此传承。
Alrighty, we had our flyby introduction. Bright beginnings, Lord Liu Zhang. It has been a few years since your father's passing, and during that time, China has only sunken deeper into turmoil and chaos. Amidst the storm, you have slowly consolidated your power to become ever stronger. The time is now to set sights on your father's ambition and achieve what even the great Liu Yan could not, to become the emperor of all China. So we can use the aspiration gathered by our predecessor, 600 points, to purchase the powerful bonuses your father has unlocked for you, and generate farther aspiration by having high-level cities, large cities and above, and by conquering settlements. I think the default amount's probably 10 aspiration per conquest. Not sure on that, don't remember, but it's a decent amount, and mainly you want to just build tall. You're one of these factions that is pretty much encouraged to build tall for aspiration points. Our first mission is to fight Yang Ren's army. It's the army right in front of us, the standard taste of victory, and then you have a few standard early game missions that you can do. As I said, we're really only going to talk about the setup on turn 1 here, because it is a pretty easy faction. There's not a lot of enemies around you. You are pretty isolated, and it's a pretty weak enemy that you have to fight in Zhanglu. So, right off the bat, we have control of the Shu lands and the Ba lands as well. The Yi province, most of it. Technically it stretches all the way down, but the Nanman are there. No one's actually at war with us except for Zhanglu, who used to be our vassal. He no longer respects us after our father has passed, and now we're at war. Zhanglu actually starts out with quite a bit of land in this scenario. He has control of the entirety of Shangyong, so he also has the capital here. He has a piece of Ba, which is a piece that we're missing. Also a piece of Basi, which is also a piece that we're missing. And of course, he traditionally controls Hanzhong, which is right over here. So we have to go up and take him out. To our north, we border Ma Teng's faction. And the cool thing is, his sons are single. And we have a widowed mother that we can use to steal all his sons if you want, or just Ma Chao, and you can even make him your heir. That is an option that I actually highly recommend. You should at least steal Ma Chao. You don't have to steal him on turn 1 though. I actually highly recommend you to think about stealing him on turn 2, because first, Ma Teng doesn't marry off Ma Chao very often. The second thing is, whatever item he starts out with, you can take a peek. So this is really how you should judge when you want to take Ma Chao over. Look at the item he starts out with. So in this case, he starts out with a philosopher. Well, that's really good. But that's going to go on himself, right? Faction leader is going to take that. But if he has, let's say, 2 items here, or multiple items here, Ma Chao's heir, he's going to pick up those items as equipment. And then if you trade for him on turn 2, you get those for free. But right now, it doesn't look like he's going to pick up anything impressive, maybe just a clay dog or a stone pig. You might as well try to grab him this turn. And Philosopher is obviously a really good item to try to grab on turn 1 as well, for the satisfaction boost. So consider paying up to get this from him as well. The trade for Ma Chao is quite simple and quite cheap. This is your mother, and it's only minus 1.4, which you can offset with a trade deal. Actually, you can do all these together with a trade deal, and it's going to be nice and positive. Steal his best general over. And once you do, if you look at your family tree, he will become your father, stepdad, and you can make him your heir. Right now, your son is your heir. He's 15, so he's only 1 year away from becoming of age, where his bonuses will be activated. The thing is, he doesn't have really good bonuses, and he's a sentinel, which is not really good for heir position. So making Ma Chao your heir right off the bat is going to be better. That way you don't have to waste 5 turns or so before he comes of age, where you get no bonuses from your heir slot. Speaking of your court, that would be your heir. You start out as second Marquis, so you have access to Grand Commandant and Grand Excellency. You actually do start out the turn in spring, so if you play someone here, you can do Faction Council right off the bat. Very, very important. So we know we need at least 2 generals in this slot. Taking the Chancellor position, I think is optional. Probably best to leave it empty for this turn. Just slot whoever you slotted in for Grand Commandant into the Chancellor next turn, and that way you don't have to pay extra salary, get the income bonus from peasantry here, income bonus from industry here, and this is a 10% discount on recruiting units, which you're probably not going to do right off the bat, and just flip-flop these 2 positions as you see according to what you need. If you're about to recruit an army, switch them over. If you hit spring, switch them over. And if it's not spring, switch them to Chancellor to take the income boost. You start out with 2 administrator positions, 1 from the prestige point, which is auto set for you by the AI, 1 from your reform. And we do want this position filled. So that's at least 4 positions that we need here. And if we look at our faction, we're halfway to Marquis, where we get to basically use up a bit more of our prestige point to customize our faction. The AI already decided to give us 3 armies, 1 spy, 1 administrator, 2 assignments, and 1 trade. It's not the best choices being diversified this much, but we can't do anything about that. I typically would still recommend the same thing. Administrators are really useful. Having 1 spy is probably enough. If you want to focus on assignments, you can get the extra character salary decrease, which is nice, to offset your delayed inheritance debuff. And trade is optional because most non-man factions that you're neighbor with can't actually trade. And until you break out of Badong, the river is worthless for you because of the blockade there. So that's also not going to be that useful. And then armies are always good. Discount for the unit upkeep is nice at the end. Those are a few things you can consider. You're only going to be able to max out 2 things. So depending on your playstyle, you can decide between the 3. I think it's most useful here. Spy, I feel like 1 here and then the rest from the skill tree or the reform tree is decent enough. Speaking of the reform tree, it is spring. We don't get to pick one because they already picked one for us, but the ones they picked are amazing. You probably start out with the best, or at least for my playstyle, this is exactly how I would want things. With some minor changes, this one's kind of optional, but essentially you have the tier 4 state workshop done. You have the basic of your industry commerce setup. You're almost there with the Onyx Dragon take. You have access to spice and silk pretty close to your starting location, so this is definitely a good route to go with. You got the default population growth here. You're halfway over here to corruption reduction on the side, copper mine upgrade. You're almost here to finish your state workshop to tier 5. You got the extra administrator here. So there is not really a wasted reform on this tree. So it's pretty decent. This is the only one I can nitpick about. But even in this case, it has access to -1 construction time right off the bat, which I don't hate. These 2 are either war. So depending on which one you want, you can only pick one at a time. Picking the other will disable the other, and so forth. And that's pretty much our starting setup. What we want to do now is look at our big court of 11 characters and figure out who goes where. So we know we need 2 administrators, 2 court positions, and for assignments, we have 3 available assignment slots. So that's at least 5 people because your court position can actually still do assignments. And I have them all planned out. That's really what we need to focus on this guide for. Who goes where. We have 2 armies on the field at the beginning. Our main army with Liu Zhang and Fa Zheng. Both of them have a unique ability. Liu Zhang's unique ability is Ceasefire. This is a really good combo with Juggernauts. So if you have your Juggernauts in the front and you use Ceasefire as the enemy approaches, they become immobilized for 60 seconds. Sure, they have 50% damage resistance, but they're going to stand there and let your Juggernauts just murder them. And that's really, really strong. Fa Zheng starts out with Mock, which as you can see does 6k damage over 60 seconds. It does have a 120 second cooldown on top of that, so it's actually 180 seconds per use. But if you're patient, it's free damage, especially during siege battles. You can just pick off enemy generals from outside their town, they'll never come out. And during actual fights, you can debuff their melee attack rate and reduce their morale on top of that. Very, very powerful skill. The rest of the skill tree is pretty standard for strategists in general, so nothing different there. He also has perceptive, which means he can capture enemy generals a lot easier. If you pick up patience on top of that, he should definitely be your leading commander in this army, assuming you're not missing on a reach, or at least swap him over before fights to increase your chance of capturing. He doesn't get along with Liu Zhang in this case, but that's a minor issue. Most of this dissatisfaction comes from desire for higher office, which is the reason why he's probably going to end up in a court position in our faction. Alright, and then we have a secondary army, and this army is guarding the southern side. It includes our only champion, Gao Tang Hedang, and he has reach and flexibility. So the traits are also not terrible. I typically have him go join the first army as the commanding general to use the early reach and the 5% replenishment. Zhu Gui is the other general here. He is much more useful as administrator because he has elusive. And speaking of administrators in court positions, it's time to start assigning people. And this is really what this guide is about. So first off, we need administrators. We're going to actually use 2 strategists because we don't have any sentinels. Zhang Song, who has cordial, increased 10% commerce, and the 2 starting skills here in scholarship and intuition for additional industry and commerce boost will go into Jiangyang, our biggest commandery, our most lucrative one. Make sure to swap the weapon to the expertise one, and if you did spawn any item that is relevant for administrators, put them in for him. The only free item you get is the stone pig plus the default bronze sword on Liu Zhang. Everything else comes from your first turn roll, so we're not going to use anything, but if you did get something that's good for administrators, put them in. And he's going to slot himself into Jiangyang right here. You can see all his bonuses. And obviously, he will become, he jumps off the cliff. That's still a bug that's still in the game, but he's here, and he's going to be a lot happier after he's in this position. Lack of purpose will also go away, so he'll be at 30. And then for the other administrator, I'm going to recommend another strategist. And this one is going to be Zhu Gui, who we just saw because he has elusive. And the only other place that we have a decent amount of commerce is actually Ba. So Ba has a harbor and an inn, whereas Shu doesn't have any commerce and Basi also doesn't have any commerce. So in this case, we're going to slot him in here and try to develop this place, even though down the line, the potential income here is very low. You're hoping to grab a place like Zhangke potentially, or expand out here to Badong to pick up another good spot for administrator. But for the time being, this is fine. And we're going to slot Zhu Gui in here. He is on, wait, why are we in assignment? We need to be here. He is on the field, so make sure you assign him this position first before recalling him. I think that percentage will go up by 1 once did we switch his weapon already? No, we didn't. So that needs to be swapped by 2% there. So still a big difference. And at this point, you can recall him. You can decide what you want to do with his units. If you keep it, it'll go for into the garrison, but this is really not worth keeping. So in my opinion, you can be deleted, but don't do this now because you want to have relative army strength for all your deal making that's about to happen. But there are the 2 administrators we would like to have. And then on top of that, we would like to assign 2 people to our court. Fa Zheng already mentioned is going to be one of them because of the high desire for higher court positions, and he's going to be very useful. His background bonus is not so useful, so in the future, when you become emperor and your lower court positions actually give their bonus faction-wide, you can switch him out then. But for the time being, he's fine. Speaking of these good background bonuses, Donghe actually has a unique one. +5 satisfaction, not so big, but commanders usually are good for those roles. Honest is good for corruption. Aesthetic will give you food, so not a bad character to keep. And we will actually just put both of them into the court here. Fa Zheng will end up here. Donghe will end up here. And then we can come to our faction council and we can pick what we want. So do this deal on the side yourself. So this will refresh into something else. And then for Donghe, we're looking for things like this. This is excellent for build up. Each time you open and close it, it'll be different. Obviously, your game might get different one than mine, so not gonna waste too much time talking about which exact one you want to pick, but things that boost your economy early on, things that can help your city build up early on are all great choices. And that takes care of our faction council. So we got our court done. Just make sure to swap Donghe over to Chancellor next turn after you picked your bonuses. Now we need to figure out our assignments. So here's really what you want. First off, your mom has wisdom as her skill. This enables reward the filial and incorrupt. That's a nice boost to satisfaction faction-wide. That's really what we need to counteract the legendary difficulty -10. You can put her in any city you want. It doesn't really matter. It's going to go faction-wide anyways. It's this one right here. So let's say I put her in the capital Shu. Let her do this. Perfect. And then for our 2 commanderies with actual commerce income, since we have so many strategists, it's good to actually just assign a few to boost our commerce income. So for example, our wife, Lady Liu, can come here in Jiangyang, boost the local commerce. And in Ba, we can assign Wang Lei to do it. He's not happy here, but he's one of the happiest characters we have, so it should be fine. You could swap them, I believe. She will be happy in both places. Maybe he'll be happier here in Jiangyang. Yes, so we can do that. That'll be better. And the reason why he's a pretty decent character to do assignment is he has dutiful. So that reduces desire. And your wife's even better because she has humble, which means no matter how high level she is, she'll never have desire for higher office. She's also a free character because she's your wife. So it's very useful to have her do assignments for pretty much the whole game. And that takes care of all the roles we have. We mentioned that I want him to be recalled to join the defense. I want him to be recalled to end up joining this first army to provide them with reach. But that's not going to happen until next turn because it would be a 1-turn cooldown. This is our starting army. We have both versions of the Dongzhou units. And if you look at the recruitment, there is a 6-unit limit for both. So what you want to do to overcome this limit is say, if I want to give, for example, Zhu Gui 6 Dongzhou Bing, the archers, I can recruit that, recall him. The turn that he's recalled, the units are put on cooldown and they don't count against the cap, and you can recruit it on another unit. So you could actually technically get a whole army full of Dongzhou, whether you want the marksman or the spearman, just by recruiting them separately on different generals, recall them, and then recruit them on the remaining generals and rinse and repeat. That works the same for elephant units, for tiger units, for Naman faction. Anything with a recruitment capacity, it only counts things that are currently on the field. So if they're on cooldown, when you recall them for that 1 turn, or if they just died and there's a 2-turn before they come back for mustering, that's when you can recruit more. And that's a pretty easy way to work around it. And the fact that you have the 6 limit is actually super nice because then you can get full retinues of them. And the spear variant defenders are pretty nice. I actually really like hybrid units that are spearmen with range because then you can apply the square formation, assuming you have a high enough level strategist. I believe this army does, right? The square formation is very, very good for spear units with bow because then they can form up They can fire their bow when the enemy approaches, for example, cavalry, and the enemy cavalry can't do anything to you. They can't charge you, because if they charge you, you have charge reflector versus mounted. If they just try to flank you, you are shooting 360 degrees with your bowmen, because you have bows facing in every direction, and they will just take damage, especially shot cavalry. And the good thing is, the opponent you face early on have nothing but shot cavalry, so you counter them pretty hard with the starting army. So you think we're pretty much done with the core setup, and I guess we are. We just have a few characters here that have no purpose in our faction. And if you look at their traits, if you look at their background, there's no reason why we should keep them. These two here, you can see assignment, 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 in our court, administrator, and the other administrators disappeared for this turn. And then these three are going to be an army. So these two are left over. Just go ahead and fire them to save you a bit of money. Release them from service. Release them from service. If you want a little bit extra cash, you can even banish them. It would just be -10, which would be offset by your +10 that you're going to do with your assignment in the capital with your mother. She's better than just grabbing the diplomacy marriage. Now, speaking of diplomacy, there are a few things you need to be mindful of. Even though we didn't get the new background and we're still at 50% extra food, that is a pretty useful bonus actually, because you can trade food, and we are going to trade food. Your job early on is to fight Zhang. So for every single non-man faction in the game that you border, give them food. You can't trade deal with them because they don't have the necessary tech, but they can accept food from you. So even if it's a 1 food or 2 food, depending on how much money you want back, you have 22. So you have plenty to use. Just trade everyone some food. You can get money back. It's going to be flat payment. It's not going to be a lot. So kind of gauge what level you want. It's really up to you. There's no right or wrong amount, but everyone needs to have a food trade with you. That way they won't fight you for at least the first 10 turns, and you can disband this army and just focus on Zhang Lu. Marry Ma Teng's faction. You can do a divorce right after if you want to pick on more of his sons, but you can also throw him a food deal. You can look at everyone's inventory to see what items you want. Do the same with Liu Biao. So pretty much trade. Give everyone 1 food if you want. You still have plenty left over. And that's pretty much what you need to do for diplomacy. At that point, then go back and disband this group like this. Just get rid of their retinues and recall them so they can go to their proper place. He can go back over here. Like I mentioned, if you want to set up a really strong defense, there's really no point. No one's going to attack you here. But for administrators, you can pump out, let's say, 6 of your favorite units and then just recall them right away. You never have to pay upkeep. They go to the garrison with the general and they can help you defend there free of charge. But in this case, we're just going to be summoning them back. And we'll do the battle here. But I think we covered everything. The only thing that we didn't really talk about is Imperial Intrigue. We don't start out with a lot of it. So what we technically want to do is increase our favor and decrease Zhang Lu's favor. It'd be really, really nice if Zhang Lu drops down to a point where the Emperor calls him the enemy of the Han, and that way you can gain points by fighting him, or else you're going to be losing point for every fight that you do, which is a bit painful. So you want to increase your own favor. You can do this once every 5 turns, and you want to decrease his favor. It will cost you a bit to do it, so it's basically you're going to drop back to exactly where you are. You'll gain some passively from your food surplus, since you do have a lot of food, and he should be losing some points once you take some of his food and public water away. But keep dropping him every chance you get. That way, once he goes close to 0, the Emperor will say he's the enemy of the Han. Now every time you attack him, you will gain point, and that's really how you want to set this up. So that's pretty much all we can do here with all this talk, and we didn't talk about our unique mechanic. So we talked about how we have 600 aspiration, how we can gain aspiration by building tall. Once you hit large city, you get +2 aspiration per turn, +4, +6, +8, +10. So building tall is actually super advantageous. That's how you can gain aspiration moving forward, aside from conquering new settlements. But what do we want to do with the aspiration? Well, here's what we got from our father, the inheritance reward. We have 5 different options, each with different cost, and each have separate cooldowns. So we can instantly level up any character in our faction by using 70 aspiration point. We can spawn a auxiliary item instantly with 10 turn cooldown. We can increase any settlements or any county's income by 35% from all sources for 15 turns with 15 turn cooldown. So this is something just basically always have on. Do this, make sure Jiangyang's boosted. That's where most of your income is. You can look at the base income. Don't look at the total. Look at what the added total is. So 300 plus 140 plus 40, 480. That's how much is getting boosted by 35%, not 935. So sometime first place here might not be the highest total, but in this case I did the math, that is actually the highest total. So you want to boost this at all time. And you can get 40% replenishment on any county that you're in. If you need to recruit a new army, if you need to heal up an army that's badly damaged, keep this in your back pocket. Increase movement and morale of army for 15 turns. Very, very useful for 60. This is really worth the price. Go for it. Don't be shy with spending it. It's actually pretty easy to make once you get your settlements up and running, because the passive growth, and you can't use these very often, every 20 turns, every 10 turns, every 15 turns. So just go ahead, get a silver item. There we go. We got dual war axe. It's as easy as that. And if you want to level up a character, if someone, it's one away from a really good skill, let's say if you really want the capture percentage. So we can use it on Fa Zheng here. Boom, Fa Zheng's leveled up, and we can get another 25% chance to capture, plus the 10% from his trait, and the default amount he gets from high level. So he's level 5. Under personal, he has a default 30% chance. So all that will play together, and you still have plenty to use before you build up for the next round. Have him lead, and we can jump into our first fight. So as you see here, he has 60 units. The capture rate is 100%. He has default last wound, so that helps, but the base is super high because Fa Zheng has all those things going for him. Patience, perceptive, high level, and decisive defeat. Let's fight this just to showcase how Dongzhuo beings should be used, and I think this guide is pretty good in terms of covering the groundworks for the faction. Alrighty, so we jump into this fight. We're mainly going to talk about these units here in particular. It's not a particularly hard fight. I think he'll accept a duel, and I think we can actually beat him just because we have a better weapon. He has nothing. Let's pull our units back. Let's pull these units back. The archer is pretty standard. Like, there's nothing to say about archers. They function just like archers. Just have them line up and shoot. Your cavalry, we're going to keep in the back. These are what we are here to talk about. So typically with these units, make sure they have both fire well and melee mode activated. That way they will use both of their weapons. When they see enemies charge up, they will fire them. Have them in hollow square. This is the perfect setup for these dual usage. You can kind of move them to the flank even if you want. Obviously if they come charging at you, it'd be kind of awkward. You want to space them out enough so the enemy cavalry can't like fit in, and they can't like get a clean charge here. It'd be very difficult for them to route like that. And then you can put your archer units kind of in between here. If you have multiple ones, they can hide there and it's pretty effective. And we can just cover the flank if they do a big flank maneuver. But you can see how the archer will work. That's kind of the whole purpose here. Yeah, he's default willing to duel. Get the duel off because you get good amount of experience for it. Also, you don't have to worry about him actually coming at you and dealing damage to your units. Pretty sure they're going to try to flank, so we're going to have them facing the two sides. We didn't get a chance to showcase this, but it's fine. You guys can figure out what this damage does is. 6k, we're on large unit size. It's like about you can see the firings going for these units. They're starting to shoot. And it's just really hard for them to avoid your shots because every single side is going to be able to shoot at them. See, they're starting to fire on the units on here. And for shock cavalry, square formation with these spear units are just really, really hard to deal with. We're going to have to countercharge a few of them, obviously. Actually, if they can't get close, we're fine. There we go, they're charging. They're dead. And when they're close, just exit and just charge out. Your spear, you have extra damage bonus against them. You have a shield, so even in this formation you have a decent amount of range block chance, 60%. So even enemy range units have a hard time picking you off. And this is actually like pretty historical to how the Han army fought the Xiongnu. You had, well, it's technically crossbowmen what they used, but essentially the flag bearers really don't do anything. That is not cool. But for enemy cavalry, they can't approach a square formation with spear and shield plus crossbows. That's why the Ye Vanguard spearmen are really, really useful. Alright, and when they're routing, we can actually go back and just set up the fire wells again. And we'll pick them off as they run. Or not. Okay, they're firing now. Alright, now you're not leaving us. Alright, we won over there. They have been killed. And we won. Not the cleanest of victories. We probably need more of these units, but overall, pretty easy win here. And they're great units overall. I think Dongzhou Bing defenders are very versatile. Alrighty. Got our taste of victory. Very standard. Capture bot. We get path to glory. We'll delegate this just to show the mission progression. We lost to Imperial favor, as we mentioned. That is going to be a concern. Mission complete. Now just recruit 2 more units. We get growing might for a big replenishment boost. While you have this activated for the Grand Commandant, you could just flush out your first army this turn by recruiting more of your Dongzhou Bing unit that you want. That way you can activate the defense. Just 2 more units would do, and everyone will replenish a lot faster. Give him some siege weapons, and you're pretty much set to go. For this, just recruit 3 of your generals that's doing nothing. I think you have at least 2 of them. The administrator's doing nothing. Yeah, actually you have 3. Because 2 administrator plus him. They're not doing anything. Just have them march over here and take this with a delegate. It's not high enough level to have a decent amount of garrison to stop you. And even if the delegate doesn't work, just have the general charge in and kill them. We are playing on romance mode. That shouldn't be hard. Main army goes up through Basi, focus taking them out, and then just clearing the Shangyong into the Hanzhong area right here. Hanzhong's right there. And we'll be able to gain control of most of this area. And that kind of ends our first enemy. By the time we wrap up with them, the food deal should expire. And we can start taking out the Nanman faction, which would not affect our Imperial Intrigue. No one's going to hate us for killing Nanman forces. And then we can save up our points to decide who our next enemy is by basically dropping their point. And you move forward like that. And that's pretty much it. The rest of the development should be pretty straightforward. Gain access to spice down here, gain access to silk up here, have a strong western and southern force, and move against whoever wins between Cao Cao and Yuan Shao over here in the central plain. Sun Ce is still going to be very big over here. So that's probably the 2 other empires that you have to deal with at the end. Kingdoms, right? When we get the 3 kingdom period. Depends on who comes out ahead over here. And Sun Ce is pretty much guaranteed to be one of them, I feel like. He's always going to have a huge area down south. But the rest of the campaign is pretty straightforward. So hopefully you guys enjoy this guide, and we'll see you guys next time when we come back and cover his father in the 190 start. So until then, bye!